After Javier Melei, libertarian president of Argentina, got rid of rent control, the housing supply skyrocketed. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. Alright, so I have quite the interesting article for you today, and it's coming out of a foreign country, Argentina specifically. So, as you know, a lot of the policies in Argentina were very, very socialist. And so one of those socialist policies they had was nationwide rent control. And the result of that policy was that housing supply was greatly limited, okay? And the thing that it was supposed to do was make housing more affordable for the people living there due to their super high inflation, but it did not work. Okay, it did not work, and a lot of landlords were just keeping their units empty rather than renting them out because they couldn't make any money off of them. So, I'm sitting here and I'm looking for a real-world example of why rent control doesn't work, and here we have the country of Argentina and their libertarian president who comes and repeals their rent control policy, and guess what? The housing supply just skyrocketed. So could we possibly see the same thing in a place like San Francisco or New York if their rent control policy was removed? Maybe. But you know what? I don't think that they are smart enough to figure this sort of thing out. Maybe they will read this same article. I'm going to go over it and tell you exactly what happened. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. So first of all, do you believe that these rent control policies are to blame for a lot of the problems that these major cities such as New York and San Francisco have? Okay? And when I talk about problems, I'm talking specifically about the cost of housing within the city. So I personally believe that it is a huge drain on development. It is a huge drain on the number of people who want to be landlords. And this is the reason why housing is so expensive in these places, okay? The rent control policies are actually doing the exact opposite of what they want. Instead of keeping housing affordable, they make housing more expensive and less available. So anyway, let's get into this article. We can talk about what Argentina did and the effect that it had. This article is coming from Newsweek.com, and it says, Javier Melei got rid of rent control in Argentina. Housing supply skyrocketed. Yeah, libertarian policies, they do work, okay? And while I'm not a full-blood libertarian by any means, I am a conservative with libertarian tendencies. So I agree with this, okay? And I believe that this is the best move for not just Argentina, but for the entire country, the U.S. So let's get into it. Argentina's recent repeal of rent control by libertarian President Javier Melei has led to a surge in housing supply, with the freedom to negotiate contracts previously restricted directly causing a drop in rental prices. Melei, a self-described anarcho-capitalist known for his free market approach, repealed the 2020 rental law enacted by former leftist President Alberto Fernandez, which had imposed restrictions on landlords and led to a significant decline in rental availability. So part of the reason I bring this up is because, they were talking about a national rent control policy. Biden was talking about that, and I believe that candidate Kamala Harris is also talking about trying to implement a national rent control policy. Well, guess what? These leftist policies, just like in Argentina, they will not work here, and they will have the opposite effect, making housing much more difficult to find for the people who need it and much less affordable. And they just can't figure this out, even though there are real-world examples just like this one. With Argentina's inflation reaching 211.4%, the highest in 32 years, rent prices were adjusted every 12 months, and leases had to last at least 3 years. The law, introduced in 2020, ended up distorting the real estate market and hurting both landlords and tenants. The law aimed to provide tenants with more financial security, but by the end of last year, an estimated 1 in 7 homes in Buenos Aires was sitting empty as landlords chose not to rent them out in Argentine pesos. Deposits were capped, and it was nearly impossible to end tenancies early. So basically what they have here is a situation where landlords were forced to sign 3-year leases, keeping rent at a certain level for 3 years, even though inflation was way higher than that. So the landlord's expenses were all shooting up through the roof, yet they were unable to increase the rents in order to, meet the inflationary numbers. And as we know, what ends up happening is landlords are sitting upside down. So rather than renting them out in this condition where you can't evict the tenant, you can't increase the rent, they were just leaving them empty. Is this surprising? I've done so many stories on warehousing of rent-controlled apartments in New York City. This is the exact same thing, except on a bigger scale, because this was nationwide in Argentina, okay? Nightmare. Absolute nightmare. For many locals, finding a new apartment have become mission impossible. But after the repeal, Buenos Aires saw a doubling of available rental units, and rental prices have stabilized. Under the new rules, landlords and tenants have more freedom to agree on lease terms. If the duration isn't specified, it defaults to 2 years. We've seen a significant increase in rental apartments, and in some cases, we have to lower prices in pesos because of fewer viewings. Soledad Balayan, head of the real estate agency More Immobiliaria, told the Argentine newspaper La Nación. So basically, before the repeal of this law, the government was the one who was setting the terms of all the rental contracts, okay? The government said how much the rent was, how long the tenancy was, and now that's up for negotiation between the two actual parties. There's no government middleman in between. Because like I've mentioned many, many times before, when the government is a middleman, you're just adding delays to the process, you're adding bureaucracy to the process, and you're making things not just less efficient, but more expensive, okay? And the government doesn't know anything about the rental business, okay? They don't know how much money you actually need in order to maintain your property. And they can't know because it is an individual thing. Every property, you could have 2 homes, identical homes, right next door to each other, and the expenses be drastically different based purely upon, hey, when did this guy buy the property? What kind of financing he has? What kind of insurance he has? What kind of updates are done on the inside? How much this tenant was willing to pay versus that tenant? There are so many factors involved, and you have to sit here and say, okay, well, you know what? Maybe we should allow the landlords to be the one who determine the terms of these contracts. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of people who just don't want to be landlords. Why would you want to be a landlord when you can't set the terms of your own contract? That would be like saying, okay, I am going to buy a grocery store, but I can't determine how much I'm going to charge for the food. I can't determine, anything. Everything is up to the government. So the government is in total control. This is a socialist policy. This is socialism. And I realize that. I know the other landlords watching this video also realize that. But the people who are begging for rent control here in the US, they don't realize that. They don't realize how much of a failure it is. And that's why I wanted to highlight this story about Argentina, because they now know, hey, rent control doesn't work. And you know what? There's examples just like this from inside the US, but people have short-term memory, or they don't have any memory. Stuff that happened in the 70s and 80s, they don't know, the young kids don't know about it. So we need to work better to educate people, especially the young people who think that these socialist policies are the solution to all their problems. We need to work better to educate them about the past failures of these same policies, okay? Since Milei's repeal of rent control laws took effect on December 29th, the supply of rental housing in Buenos Aires has jumped by 195.23%, according to the Statistical Observatory of the Real Estate Market of the Real Estate College. Not everyone in Argentina supports Milei's measure. Critics argue that the repeal disproportionately benefits landlords at the expense of tenants, many of whom are already struggling with the country's economic crisis. Some worry that the increased housing supply could be temporary, leading to a surge in prices once the market stabilizes. Yeah, well, you know what? Here's the thing, right? The market is what dictates the price. If the market continues to dictate the price and landlords are making a ton of money off of their properties, then will they not be motivated to build more properties, which once again will increase the housing supply and lower the cost because there will be greater supply? I'm just saying, right? If we let the market do its thing, then there will be a balance. There will be a good balance between the amount of supply and the cost. If we allow the government to interfere, then the only thing we're going to do is create a artificial shortage. And that's not what I want to see. So great article. I'll put a link to the article in the description down below. Let me know what you think, okay? If they repeal rent control in these US cities that have it, do you think that they would also see a great surge in the amount of housing supply available?